When did you? I'm just kidding.
I said no goofing off, and then
I know. Now we are, but that's okay.
that's 2 minutes off the clock.
Nah, it's only 30 seconds. Welcome back, parents, to another conversation starter. As you can see, we got a new setup. We're trying some different things out. So, still same content though.
Yeah.
Pastor Mario.
Dawson, the youth leader.
Yeah, and it's been a minute since we've kind of done it in this way. We had 2 weeks off of youth group about a month ago, and then Dawson and Jericho were on vacation, and so he wasn't there last week. And so, but we're back.
Yeah.
We are back. So this past Sunday, we started our new series on sexuality and identity. We're calling it Beautifully Woven. And it's a 5-week series, as you guys know. But we started the first week, and I think it went pretty well.
Yeah, it was a very, very good night.
Yeah.
Broke up into 2 groups immediately. We haven't really done that I don't know if we've done that at all, actually.
At least not from the jump.
Not from the
Usually we'll break off into small groups.
Yeah.
But like after 20 minutes of teaching.
Yeah, but there was no set teaching at the beginning. We went straight into guys and girls, which worked pretty well. And it offered us a more comfortable space for the subject matter.
Yeah, it really did. And it was great. We gathered questions from the students to start off. So they kind of just wrote questions regarding sexuality and put it in the, what is that?
It was a bowl. Yeah.
Put it in the bowl, and you know, at the end of the series, at the end of the 5 weeks, we'll go back and kind of address those questions after having talked about, you know, everything that we're going to talk about with the series. But I think in general, the series, at least the first week, went pretty well for the first groups. It was kind of cool. We did a debrief as to kind of what was the main, I don't know, like I guess the temperature of each group, like the girls and the boys. The boys, our conversations more centered around like the theological perspective. Like, not that the boys didn't agree with the Bible stance on sexuality or anything.
They just wanted to know more about it.
They wanted to know more about it. Like, how does it make sense? And, you know, then they got into like some debate.
Yeah. They actually debated with each other. It might shock parents to hear that, but they did.
Yeah, they debated. It was healthy debate.
Yeah. Nothing
crazy. And it was relevant. I mean, it was relevant to the topic of, you know, if someone is continuing on in their an unbiblical sexuality or an unbiblical perspective of sexuality, you know, and they are just like asking God for forgiveness or repenting and not really changing anything about themselves about that. Like, does God forgive that? Does God forgive them? So that was one topic that came up with the boys. Yeah. And the girls, from what we heard from Jordan and Jericho, was more on the practical application side. Yeah. Definitely still theological. Yeah. But more on like, how do we apply that practically in our schools with our friends? Like if my friend comes up to me and comes out as gay, how do I respond? What do I say? You know?
Yeah, they were more interested in it probably just relationally. Yeah. You know, where the guys wanted to understand, you know, the origins of it, how it applied, and then give a specific scenario and be like, okay, what would God do about that? The girls were more like, okay, you know, I believe all of that. What do I do when someone else doesn't? You know, like, what do I do when they come up to me and they think differently? Which obviously at that age is terrifying, because conflict is terrifying. And so knowing...
Especially about this.
Yeah, knowing that you think differently than someone and that they know you think differently, that is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's terrifying for you, parents, for me, for all of us. I mean, it'll
forever be terrifying.
It will. It just will. Because, I mean, the Bible is offensive purposely. I mean, like, it's going against what we feel like in our sinful nature and things like that. So, I mean, it's going to offend people. It's going to offend our friends. But it's like, how do we respond? And this is what we were talking about in our meeting before youth group. How do we respond and teach the students to respond with grace and truth without leaning too much on either side. Like, how do we weave them together like Jesus did? And so
we should make some of the like distinctions that we made within the group as well. We talked about the different kind of structures for sexuality and for defining it. So we identified like the world, which we tried to be, smart about saying like it's not us versus them, but we do have to identify the distinction. And so that is the world, like in general. And we identified theirs as like emotional, and it's based on how you feel. And then God's definition of it is firm and solid and set in stone.
Pretty clear. And that's the word they were using, like God's perspective is clear.
It's defined, and
that's a good word.
That'd be the big kind of difference. And obviously we don't know specifically everything the girls talked about, but they touched on similar ideas, like just the difference between the two.
From what Jordan was telling me, I mean, they got into some really good theological discussions about at least trying to like even the scales a little bit too, like, and we had some of that with us, but like girls, or at least Jordan was trying to communicate, and I think Jerica too, trying to communicate with them, like, sexual sin is sexual sin, like homosexuality, transgenderism, gender identity, that's different than what the Bible lays out, is all in the category of sexual immorality. And that can be cheating on your wife, cheating on your girlfriend, cheating on your boyfriend, lustful thoughts, lustful thinking, all of those things we're all susceptible to. So while, I may not be struggling with same-sex attraction or feelings like that, maybe I'm struggling with lustful thoughts.
Right.
That puts me in the same, like, you know what I mean? Like, I am struggling with a sexual sin.
And we had to do that with the guys too, because it's a sensitive topic. And I think that they're at that age where they haven't learned about it enough to respond, with grace towards it. They just know it's bad. And so we're trying to walk them through the grace part of it. And so Jackson made a good point about sin scaling and how naturally we try to view, he made a scale. He said lying and then murder. And he said we try and put it on a line like that, we're like lying, not bad, murder, bad. And he made the point, which is biblical, that sin is sin. And so that'll be a big focal point of this series, is just remembering that, okay, yes, we're talking about very kind of egregious sin, if you will, like it's publicly known, it, like the church doesn't respond well to it. But we're still talking about sin. We've talked about sin before, and so we're talking about a response to that, not this crazy, out of the water thing. And so that'll be a key reminder,
And I think that like the main, I guess you could say the main thrust of week 1 was really trying to help the students understand that, like how you were saying, like we gave like the different perspective, like the world's perspective is based on like feelings, like this is who I am. This is how God made me.
They're like entwined. Like identity and sex are the same for people.
They are interchangeable. They are the same, one and the same. Where we were like trying to separate, like the Bible separates it like
into distinct categories.
God gives us, and we talked about like God gives us his image, which is our identity. He gives us 2 unchanging, distinct genders, male and female. And out of those genders comes our sexuality, which is simply just the capacity to have sexual attraction to the opposite gender.
And so they're linked, but they're not the same.
They're linked, but they're not the same. And the other 2 is not like the totality of my identity is not that I am a male or that, she's a female. It is, I am an image bearer who happens to be a male. Who happens to be a female. You know what I mean? Like, And that's like trying to help the students understand, okay, this is how the design looks like.
Yeah.
So that was the main thrust of the night.
Yeah.
We had a lot of good conversation with the students. They seemed very engaged.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I thought they were going to be very silent.
Very awkward.
But it seemed like the girls, like once they got the ball rolling, they were opening up and talking about their friends and stuff. The boys
were ready to go.
They were going in. Yeah. So for you parents, we want to make this we want to be sensitive with you guys with having the conversations, because we understand that for you guys, you're not necessarily, you guys have access to the 5-week material, but you're also, you're not in the room while we're having the conversation. So you don't necessarily know all that which was talked about.
Yeah.
So the questions that we have for you guys today are kind of like, they're hitting on the main things.
Yeah.
But they're not so specific that it's like awkward.
Yeah. And we don't expect you to teach a lesson out of it or anything. Like this is just further materials.
Just for conversation's sake.
Yeah.
Just to let the students know, like, hey, you're in on the conversation as well.
Yeah.
It's not just the youth pastors, not just the youth leaders.
Yeah.
Oh, my mom and my dad care about this subject too.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
so, what do you think about the first question?
Yeah. So it was actually in the lesson, but someone brought it up naturally before we got to it. But so read John 7:53 to 8:11. It's actually the little section that just says it's not in the earliest manuscripts. That's a good way to find it.
Exactly.
But so that's the story of Jesus, of the woman caught in adultery, which it's funny that's, the woman and the guy seem to skate away, but the woman caught
that's
in
a whole
adultery,
other thing.
Yeah. The woman caught in adultery brought before Jesus, read that and just ask, like, how did he respond? Like very, like literally look, like in the text, look at how he responded, because he does respond. Well, one, he responds by not responding, which is kind of funny. That's more, I view that as Jesus being like, yeah, whatever. But then when he does respond, he, takes away the sin scaling of it. And he's like, any of you who hasn't sinned, you go ahead and condemn her. And they can't, because sin is sin. They've all committed it. And then at the end, the point that we made, we talked about it being probably the most important aspect of his response, is that he doesn't just justify the sin. He says, okay, now go and sin no more. Like when he sends her off after forgiving her, he gives her a call to action. And so it's not, for our response personally, we should be quick to forgive, but we shouldn't compromise the truth of, that is sin. Yeah. Like Jesus doesn't compromise that, yes, she was caught in sin, and he tells her to go and sin no more, don't do it again, but he also doesn't stone her.
Exactly.
Like it's the two extremes, and he finds that balance of forgiving but not compromising the truth,
Exactly. This is an example of him weaving the grace and truth.
Yeah.
You got the grace where he is forgiving someone who doesn't deserve to be forgiven. None of them deserve to be forgiven.
Yeah.
But she's not out here condemning them for their sin.
Yeah.
She is receiving the grace of the Lord, and God is being gracious with her, but he's also trying to guide her in truth. Go and sin no more.
Yeah.
This is not what I have for you in your life.
Which obviously, as people, and especially people interacting with peers and friends, we're not going to do it perfectly the way that Jesus did. We're not going to find that balance just right off the bat.
He's God, he's perfect, and he's going to know how to exactly weave that.
Yeah. But it can be a good encourager to be like, okay, this like just general sin. It doesn't have to be, that situation where your friend comes out to you or your friend tells you that they're addicted to porn or whatever. It can be just general sin that you should speak up about. This can be a great example of like, okay, finding that balance of grace and truth.
Yeah.
To where you can actually address your friend's sin without just downtroddening them and making them feel alone, because that's ultimately what you don't want to do. You don't want to single them out to the point where they feel like they can never tell you anything again,
Yeah, that's so true. And so, I think this is a good question for you guys to, be very, you can look at the text together and it's just, they can kind of point things out that Jesus is doing in the way
and you
that
can
he's
get
responding.
Specific examples, because they are there.
They're specific.
He specifically responds. It's not a parable. It's him.
It's
him doing
it. Is him. And then for the second question, why do you think people find it easy? There's something you can ask them. Why do you think people find it easy to see their identity as something that is fluid? So if you think about the culture's perspective, the word fluid is used in terms of our sexuality or in terms of our identity. There's actually an emerging gender identity that's called gender fluid. I can be fluid between either the two or all of which, all of them, perceived all, whatever. But why do you think people find it easy that our identity is more fluid than actually a solid design? You know what I mean? And then after they answer that question, you can ask a follow-up question of what evidence is there to support God's design as a solid design, something that is stamped, that is unchanging. This is something that God has given to us, and it's a stamped, solid structure. And you can refer to Genesis 1:27 and 1:28. Just read it, and this is the passage we read, and just look for the ideas of the solid structure of it.
And it's a good question to bring up where, encourage them to actually think about okay, what perspective people are having, and then how to respond with truth.
Exactly.
If the first one was the applicable one, of okay, how do I respond with grace? This one would be the more theological one of okay, how do I, before I respond, how do I know the truth part of it? Before I respond to someone telling me that their gender is fluid, how do I know it's not?
That's good. And that's good.
And so always make sure when we're going into these situations of grace and truth that the truth part is there to begin with. We don't want to leave that up to the moment.
Exactly.
And wing it,
Yeah, it's good for us to know. It's why we're going through the series. It's why we're trying to equip the students to know these things and also how to respond in grace. So these questions we leave with you parents. We hope that you have some great discussions with your student during your devotional times or whenever you decide to have the conversation. If you guys need anything or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Please do not hesitate. Some of you guys have reached out after reading some of the series. I appreciate that a lot. Next week, we're going to start to get into identifying what exactly is our identity. What does it mean to be made in the image of God? And so we're looking forward to that time with students and to being back for another conversation starter. So
in the office.
You look. All right, guys. So you guys have a blessed week. Hello, parents. This is Pastor Mario. Thank you guys for joining us for this week's conversation starter. If you want more ways that you can engage with your youth, you could check out the other conversation starters here on my side. Thank you guys for joining us. Hope you guys are doing well.